Unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented TV.
Welcome to Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV, where we find the facts, kill the spin, and tell it like it is as best we can about subjects of relevance, hopefully, to you and to the world. Well, you would have had to have been asleep for days if you weren't aware of the shenanigans involving Lord Peter Mandelson, somebody who I know pretty well because I used to work with him, who was the British ambassador to the United States until recently, it has to be said, when following an ignominious decline and fall in his fortunes, he actually became the ex-British ambassador, despite Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister's best efforts to try and keep him in post. For reasons that only he can understand, it seems that Peter Mandelson had the ear and the heart and the support of Keir Starmer well beyond Mandelson's sell-by date, by which I mean he was beginning to be a massive liability to the government. But despite that, despite everything that was being said to Keir Starmer, he said he had the full confidence of Keir Starmer right up till just before he fired him. Well, that raises a lot of questions about Mandelson, and we'll talk about that with my guest in a moment. But perhaps even bigger questions about the man who still is in post, namely the Prime Minister himself. Again, Starmer didn't fire himself, just the people around him. And this is not a first incident. Starmer seems to be very good at losing a whole bunch of people from his cabinet, including a homelessness minister who tried to make her resident tenants homeless. A woman in the transport department, Louise Haigh, who resigned apparently because of fraud issues, and a whole bunch of other ones who were simply thrown out because they didn't vote the way Keir Starmer wanted them to. This man seems to be not very good at people management, and perhaps even worse at people judgment. But what's the story here? Should Peter Mandelson have been fired? I tell you now, I think so. And there's some previous form I'll share on the show about why I think that. And what does this really mean about Keir Starmer's suitability to be the Prime Minister, the man in charge of the government? Well, joining me now is rights campaigner and political activist Kabeer Kher from Norfolk. Kabeer, thanks for joining us from that beautiful part of the world. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Lembit. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. I always like it when I come up there because it's a pleasure to come to one of the most beautiful parts of the world, a place that I used to fondly go to when I was a kid, just for the sake of holidays. A little bit about you. You have stood previously in general elections, haven't you?
That's right. So I stood for Reform UK in mid-Norfolk at the general election last year. We came close. We got 20% of the vote, but unfortunately we missed out that time. However, the support we have now going forward means we've got a very good chance next time.
So you could be in the cut and thrust of Parliament after the next election, a place I've been, some of you may know, but unfortunately I am no more there. Who knows what the future holds, of course. But I did work with Peter Mandelson. Let's start with the big picture question here, Kabeer. What do you think should have happened to Peter Mandelson? And let's remember the choreography here. Mandelson, to everyone, a lot of people's surprise, was appointed the British ambassador to America, despite the fact, in my view, he's not very clubbable at all. And then suddenly he gets dragged into the Epstein scandal, some ridiculous sort of close connection with Epstein, and which went on and on and on. That's not Peter Mandelson knocking to come in, is he? No. It's brilliant when that kind of thing happens. Well, let's see if he goes away. He's trying to sign. You're doing that. Was it a ghost? Was it a ghost? What could it have been?
The ghost of by-elections past.
Oh dear, they're the things that go viral. There we go. It just seemed like it was darkness outside. Very strange.
No, in answer to the question, Lembit, no. I mean, what should have happened to Peter Mandelson? Well, the answer is he should never have been in that post in the first place. I mean, this is a man that has been sacked by a British Prime Minister for the third time. Is it the third time? Maybe it's the
third
fourth
time.
I think I've lost count. he's like this yo-yo that just keeps coming back, or boomerang, whatever you want to call him. I don't know what sort of hold he has over the Labour Party, but somehow he seems to find himself in position of power. And everyone talks about how competent he is, but he keeps getting himself embroiled in these scandals. I just don't understand it. Have they just got so little talent in the Labour Party that they have to keep appointing Peter Mandelson? I wouldn't actually put it past Keir Starmer to reappoint him in some sort of fashion before the end of this Parliament, because let's face it, he has got such a dearth of talent available to him, and Peter Mandelson is the man that just keeps resurrecting.
Yes, I mean, let's see what he said in relation to all of this himself. What's this?
Tremendous sense, a profound sense of sympathy for those people, those women who suffered as a result of his behaviour and his illegal criminal activities. And secondly, I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done. And I regret very much that I fell for his lies. I fell and accepted assurances that he had given me about his indictment, his original criminal case in Florida. Like very many people, I took at face value what he said. With hindsight, with fresh information, many years later, we realized that we had been wrong to believe him. He's a charismatic criminal liar, we now see. And I regret very much indeed, I felt it like an albatross around my neck since his death in 2018 or 19 when it was. I feel a tremendous sense of regret, not only that I met him in the first place, but that I continued the association and I took at face value the lies that he fed me and many others.
Well, that's pretty embarrassing, isn't it? Here's the man who represents Britain, the old country, to the new world, and he didn't realise that Epstein was guilty after he'd been prosecuted, Kabeer.
It's just incredible. I mean, what sort of, you have to ask yourself, I mean, there's stupidity, and then when things get to a certain point, you start to have to ask questions. What sort of hold did this man have over Peter Mandelson that he would keep coming back into contact with him? You know, what did he have that Peter Mandelson so desperately needed? I just don't understand it. It was a similar story with other people like Prince Andrew, who continued their relationship with Epstein far longer than they should have. And we seemed, it reminds me very much of the Harvey Weinstein story, where all these people somehow didn't know what was going on, but really did know what was going on. And only whenever it was public did they come out and say, oh yeah, I knew it all along, but didn't do anything. I think there's so many, everything that he said there just brought out more questions than answers. So it's no surprise to me that he's gone.
Yeah, it did seem a bit strange. And let's recall after his, in my view, synthetic apology, how the news was broken. But let's just remember the context here. This is a man who, as you said, has been fired now 3 times by a Labour Prime Minister, 2 times for different kinds of impropriety during the Labour administration. And then now, as soon as Labour get back in, pretty much, he gets appointed and fired again. I worked with him, incidentally. And yeah, he was Secretary of State for Northern Ireland when I was Shadow Secretary of State. And I'd actually been in the job far longer than him. And first he told me a small lie, which didn't really matter. And then he told me a whopping lie, which essentially I compared notes with the late David Trimble, who was a very big character in the unionist movement at the time. You'll have known him because we both came up from the same part of the world. And he actually lied to us. He double-crossed both myself and David Trimble. And I remember thinking, I don't want to work with this person anymore. I'm not willing to. And within days, not because of me, but within days, he had been fired. But he wouldn't have had my cooperation after that anyway. So I could have told you that politically he was a bit of a wrong un. I don't expect perfection from people, Kabeer, any more than I expect it from myself. And that's just a long way off. But I do expect somebody who's the British ambassador to America to have the common sense, and I'm being charitable now, but the common sense to recognize that hanging around with Epstein, a convicted paedophile, long after the truth came out, might not have been the very smartest thing to do, Kabeer?
Absolutely, and you know what? It's actually worse than that. It casts real doubt on the judgment of Keir Starmer. This is a man, as you said, has been caught lying so many times in the past. He's had to resign twice in disgrace, and so you really have to question the judgment of a prime minister that, knowing all of that history, as Keir Starmer does, put him in such a high-profile role. It was inevitably going to lead in another resignation in disgrace, which is where we are today. And I really question the judgment of Keir Starmer. He really has turned out to be the bookworm in the corner who has no people skills. We were told before the election that, you know, the adults were back in the room and this was going to be a different kind of prime minister. And all we needed was a competent prime minister, unlike that ghastly Boris Johnson, to run the country properly and everything would be okay. And lo and behold, we've had probably the most calamitous first year of a government I can ever remember.
Yeah, it seems like that to me. I would say this is the worst cabinet in my political lifetime, and the worst qualified, the worst educated. One of the ironies, this is for another time, but one of the ironies is they go on about education. In fact, Tony Blair stole a line from Lenin: education, education, education. Did you know that came from Lenin?
I didn't know that. No, that's interesting.
I think it was Lenin. I don't think it was Marx. It definitely came from that era. And went on and on and on about everyone going to university. And now we had a deputy prime minister, who we'll talk about in a minute, who left school with no qualifications. And what are we saying? That qualifications do matter or don't matter? Why praise somebody who apparently is working class but isn't qualified to, in my view, aspire to that level? Are we saying, oh, you don't really have to get any qualifications because you can do well anyway? Total contradictions there. But let's go back to the actual resignation itself.
There, but what we saw in those statements from the Foreign Office Minister Stephen Doughty was some significant breaking news. Lord Peter Mandelson has been sacked as the British ambassador to the United States. We have a statement from the Foreign Office. We heard it just then. I'll just recap it. It says, in light of the additional information in emails written by Peter Mandelson, the Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary to withdraw him as ambassador. The emails show that the depth and extent of Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, of course, Mr. Epstein, the late convicted sex offender, is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment. In particular, Peter Mandelson's suggestion that Jeffrey Epstein's first conviction was wrongful and should be challenged is new information. In light of that, and mindful of the victims of Epstein's crimes, he has been withdrawn as ambassador with immediate effect. Let's go straight to Westminster there. Henry, there was a lot of pressure, wasn't there, on the government to sack Mr. Mandelson, but all of this coming just before a very important state visit by President Trump to the UK, which Lord Mandelson was instrumental in helping navigate.
That's right. It's horrible timing for Sir Keir Starmer as he tries yet again to get what he calls phase 2 of his government on the right track. But it had become inevitable, I think.
And I would say that's true. It had become completely inevitable as soon as the first story came out. You just knew that Peter Mandelson was going to sink because he's so utterly incompetent in terms of his interpersonal relations. I don't know. Did you think he had a chance of surviving this?
No, I'm with you. I mean, the minute you smelt it, you felt that this story wasn't going away. It was sort of rumbling in the background because there was so much other news going on at the time as well. But it ultimately culminated in his sacking, and I'm not surprised. It really did surprise me that he actually went as far as advocating for Epstein not to be prosecuted. Of course, we're still in the ridiculous position where the only person that has been prosecuted for any of these Epstein crimes is Ghislaine Maxwell. And no one else has been prosecuted. Which I find incredible. So possibly one of the only women that was involved in the crimes of Epstein is the only one that's been prosecuted. So there's still so many unanswered questions about what happened with Epstein. Obviously, there's the infamous supposed list that may or may not exist, and there's so much murky waters with all of these goings on, and it really does give the ordinary person, the ordinary man in the street, a real sense of how these elites live. They live a very different life to the ordinary person. They're flying in private jets to islands, and when push comes to shove, they look after their own. That's what Mandelson did. He advocated for his friend Jeffrey Epstein not to be prosecuted, and that's how it works. And so when President Trump says things like "drain the swamp," this is exactly what people are thinking about. They're talking about this elite, this cabal of people like Mandelson and Keir Starmer and whoever else is involved at the top of society, and how they interact with each other and look out for one another. And people have had enough.
Look at this. Mandelson described Epstein as my best pal. My best pal. And he didn't know what Epstein was doing, apparently. No idea at all. Didn't have a clue.
I mean, it just doesn't seem credible that he wouldn't know what was going on, and I just have to wonder what sort of events he was attending at his house, because God knows what was going on there. It's not something I've followed incredibly closely because it doesn't interest me, but it does seem to me that, you know, every wrong'un you've ever come across seems to have been involved with Epstein at some point.
Yeah, I've been to the Isle of Man, but it's not quite Epstein Island, and. I doubt whether the weather was so good, but you're right. It just seems to me that these people live a completely different kind of life. It's the best pal. It's just so awkward. You see all this. Look at these pictures.
Yeah.
And he didn't know what was going on. Didn't have a clue. You know, it's just like, you know, we love you.
No one
Happy birthday, Jeffrey. We love you. I mean, it's just like, it's just cringeworthy.
Yeah. No one believes it. Yeah.
I've never met Epstein. I never knew him. Right up to his incredibly mysterious death. You know, it's like...
Well, look, the most mysterious thing about Jeffrey Epstein is where he got his money from. No one seems to know. And this is why the kind of conspiracy theorists have been kind of swirling with their theories about who he represented and who he worked for. But I don't know where he got his money from. Do you?
No idea. It's not. I just don't get it. And how did he get all that connection? But there is obviously a theory that he was some sort of an operative for some security force or some nefarious nation that was sponsoring him to get compromising videos and photos of people that they could then control. You know, I'm beginning to think that's more credible. And why else would this? Isn't really the day to talk about the missing Epstein files. Sorry, missing Epstein files. But you sort of do begin to think it's all too weird. It's all too much, really. And
I mean, you know, no smoke without fire.
Yeah, well, that's what they say. Yeah,
it just definitely applies here. There's just been so many different characters involved with this story that we get a sense, right? You know, we had it with Southport, you know, earlier when, you know, we knew as a public that there was information that was being withheld by the authorities, and we have the exact same sense with these Epstein files, that there is a lot of information that is being withheld from the public. And I hope that when President Trump became president for a second term, that, you know, sunlight would be the best disinfectant, and that, you know, a lot of this information would come out. It hasn't as yet. Maybe it will come out in due course. But in the meantime, we do, as a public, have a sense that we're being lied to.
Yeah, sunlight incidentally kills foot and mouth disease. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No.
Not a lot of people know that. One reason the foot and mouth disease persisted so much at the time when I was a member of Parliament was because it was grey and wet all the time. Foot and mouth loves that. Whole different scandal for a whole different time. Now let's look at the words that Keir Starmer used. That Mandelson has full confidence. How can we have full confidence in a prime minister who had full confidence in Peter Mandelson? It's not rhetorical. Go on. Have your say.
I mean, yeah. It just seems incredible. It's a bit like when Keir Starmer says he has confidence in someone, it reminds me of the dreaded Premier League. You know, the board expresses their confidence in their manager, which is always about a couple of weeks before they get sacked. You know, and that's how I feel now. Every time Keir Starmer says he's got confidence in someone, you just feel it's just a matter of days.
And there is some form here. other people have resigned. This is Rushanara Ali, who is the homelessness minister. Do you remember why she resigned?
Oh,
go on.
Yeah, I mean, I seem to recall it was something to do with making people homeless.
Yeah. She's basically trying to do something which was almost exactly contrary to the very legislation they were trying to put through and the very moral ethos they were trying to enforce on landlords. But as a landlord, she was causing trouble for her tenants. And
That's
so
right.
for the sake of an extra few £100 a month, she lost her job as a minister. And so that was one. Then this is not meant to be like a test of you. Do you know who this is? Louise Haigh was transport minister.
Right.
She had to leave because of some really dubious dealings with some missing phones that weren't missing at all. I don't know, fraud's a strong word to use, but there was something in financial dealings, and she had to go. And then, of course, who can forget the next one? Who's the third woman in the trio?
Oh, it has to be Angela Rayner.
Bingo. There she is. There she is.
I mean, Angela Rayner was the one person who used to bring out anger in my left-wing friends. You know, my left-wing friends who would support Labour or whoever. When it came to the election and Labour won, she was the one person that they were quite angry about. People do, again, they're not silly. We had a sense that she just didn't, she wasn't the person that she was putting across. And I've nothing against working class people. There's been lots of working class people that have come into the Commons and done well. David Davis came from working class background. John Major left school at 16, so that doesn't mean that you can't make it as a politician. But she seemed to just leave school and not progress in any way. She didn't seem to have learned anything. She just seems to have become a Labour member and been institutionalised by that party, because she just never seemed to have anything of value to add to any debate whatsoever that she was involved in. So it's not surprising. I mean, I do remember when she first went into Parliament in government, and Kevin Badenoch had that exchange with her about how she'd been stitched up as housing minister, and how she wasn't going to be able to achieve any of the goals that she'd set out in the manifesto. And that's exactly what's happened. I saw a graph just a few days ago, which showed planning approvals from 2017 just crashing, and it's continued to crash all the way up until now. And that is despite the fact that Labour came in promising to build, hundreds of thousands of houses every year. I mean, that was, in my mind, that was an easy win for Labour. It didn't require much government spending. A few reforms here and there, a few tinkering of the planning system, change a little bit of legislation. There was a way that you could increase house building and create jobs, actually create some nominal GDP growth, and perhaps make the cost of living a little bit less for people who were struggling to get on the housing ladder. And they have completely failed. The planning applications since Labour came into government have completely collapsed, and it was her responsibility. So she has been a total failure in her role, as well as what's happened with the scandal around stamp duty. And it is a scandal. Primarily, the reason it's a scandal is because she herself advocated a note to the Treasury that she wanted to see stamp duty increase. She thought that was a good way to raise funds, and for her to then turn around and be so hypocritical as to want increased stamp duty for everyone else, but set up trusts in order to avoid it herself, was, in my view, complete hypocrisy, and she had to go.
Absolutely agree with you on this. That, to me, is her true crime here. I don't feel that strongly about the stamp duty money itself. It's the fact that she did exactly the opposite of what she wanted everybody else to be forced to do. She moaned about other people, and what did she call the Conservative scum, and seemed to have this vitriolic hatred of the middle class and the upper middle class and the upper class. And then she's buying this £800,000 apartment in Hove, actually, I think, as they call it. And I think, to me, that's the issue. That's the issue. It's that she just looked like exactly the things she was lambasting. I don't have any issue with her being wealthy enough to buy a place. And as I say, I don't feel that strongly about her tax affairs, but it's the hypocrisy of it. I had a run-in with her on television a couple of years ago. Matt Hancock making a lot of money in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. And then when I pointed out from her register of interest that she'd got benefits in kind herself, she went crazy. And the only way to interpret it is that Hancock, the evil Tory, isn't allowed to do it, but Angela Rayner is, because she's working class or something. I think you're right, Kabeer. That's exactly what did for her. And go on.
I'm not surprised she went crazy. Look, there's an old saying that an empty vessel makes the most noise. That tends to be the people who aren't thinking about what they're saying, about the consequences, who aren't really thinking these things through. They tend to make them the most noise, especially when they shine a mirror up against them, and they look back at themselves and they don't like what they see. And that's the position she was in. And she is just so out of touch. The idea that her constituents would have the money to spend on tax advisors who would advise them on how to set up a trust and even avoid the stamp duty in that way in the first place. It's just beyond the vast majority of people. Just shows how out of touch she is. So yes, I don't have a problem with her avoiding tax. I generally advocate for low taxes. The hypocrisy is she advocates for high taxes and she avoids them herself. And it really comes back to this animal farm business of, 2 legs good and 4 legs bad. And, we're all equal, but some are more equal than others.
Yeah, it's so Orwellian. So much of what the Labour Party's done is Orwellian. One more observation, we're pretty much out of time, but just squeeze this in. One of the reasons I think the whole situation is so incendiary is because the relentless attempts to drag Donald Trump into the whole Epstein affair. Now, I don't know the inside story, but I kind of feel that probably he obviously knew Epstein. I mean, this is from a long time ago, in 1992, 33 years ago. But that doesn't necessarily mean he was doing anything terrible. I don't know. But whatever, this is a really sore point for Donald Trump. So you've got the British ambassador just rubbing British political salt into American wounds. It's kind of unbelievable.
This is it. And, Donald Trump has had his critics on the right as well as the left. And people have, brought up this idea that he has been involved with Epstein in the past. Although I would say most of that was a very, very long time ago. It doesn't appear that he was involved more recently. And he certainly wasn't doing what Mandelson was doing and advocating for him to be released or not prosecuted after all of these crimes come into light. So I do think it's different. I think you're right in one sense. Donald Trump's critics are right in the sense that he moved in those circles, and Donald Trump freely admits that as part of his appeal is that he knows how the elites of the Western world run. He moves in the same circles. He knows their names. He knows where they drink, and so he's able to then fight them better in many ways when he talks about draining the swamp. So I don't think ill of Donald Trump for having gone there decades ago. I think that for me is very different from having advocated for somebody who's been arrested for sexual crimes to be released.
Looking then at the big picture here, Keir Starmer has clearly taken another big reputational hit here after giving full confidence to a man, Peter Mandelson, whose best pal was a convicted paedophile. Now, once again, one has to be a bit careful here. A guilt by association is a very dangerous thing to suggest. I've worked with Jerry Kelly, who pretty much ran the IRA, and lots of other people from the paramilitary groups in Northern Ireland. And that was because I was trying to help to make a peace. So association per se doesn't make you guilty. It seems to me a little bit like the Angela Rayner situation where her crime was hypocrisy. It's something about the disingenuous way in which Peter Mandelson operated. And there's one thing he said that gave it away. He said he deeply regrets ever being introduced to Jeffrey Epstein. Hold on a second, Mandelson. No one told you to make him your best pal. I've met lots of people, some of whom I think are very unsavory. And some people literally give me the creeps. I don't choose them to be my best friend. And this is the problem. If you're the British ambassador to America, it's a terrible revelation that he didn't regret his friendship with Epstein. He regretted the fact he was introduced. The only way to interpret this, Kabeer, is that Peter Mandelson isn't smart enough to make his own own judgments about his friends. He's so suggestible that if he meets bad people, he'll be fooled.
Yeah, this is it. This is Peter Mandelson all over. He is slippery. He's used some sort of weasel words there, as you suggest, in the way that he's tried to excuse his own behaviour. And quite frankly, I think it's indefensible. I really hope this is the nail in the coffin of Peter Mandelson's career. I think we've quite seen just about enough of him. Him and Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair, in my view, are three of the worst people in the world for having been responsible for taking us into the war in Iraq. And one of those, you would think that Tony Blair's gone. He keeps coming back, Middle East envoy. You think you've got rid of Alistair Campbell. Now he's on the podcast with Rory Stewart. And you think you've got rid of Peter Mandelson, and then he comes back as British ambassador. I really wish the three of them would just disappear.
Yeah, that's a very dodgy word for a Northern Ireland person to say that disappeared, but that's another story. I take it it's not a threat. One last thought here. Keir Starmer keeps telling us he was two things, that he was the son of a toolmaker, which kind of rebounds every time he says it. I feel sorry for his dad. I didn't know his dad, but somehow he's almost being mocked every time Starmer says it because it's such a ridiculous thing to keep saying. And it just doesn't sound right in a way because it lends itself to obvious ridicule. But the other thing was he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service, and all the people he missed. He was happy enough to appoint people like Mandelson and moan about putting people like Lucy Connolly, who said hurty words on the internet, in prison, while Labour councillor Ricky Jones said, let's slit their throats, but got away with it because apparently he pleaded not guilty and people would know that he didn't mean it. Who's going to be, based on that, who do you think will he appoint as the next British ambassador to America? My team came up with a suggestion, but you go first.
Oh my God, I dread to think, when I I mean, if knowing Keir Starmer as I do now, having seen him in action and as Prime Minister for a year now, I think the one thing that we can be certain of is that Peter Mandelson's replacement will be even worse than Peter Mandelson. That's the one thing we can say for sure. I don't know if it's going to be Darth Vader, if it's going to be, the Grim Reaper, but because the list of people who are worse than Peter Mandelson is a pretty small list. But whoever's on that list, I have every confidence Keir Starmer will find them.
Well, I put to my team, find somebody who has fooled Keir Starmer before, who, despite multiple offences, never went up in court for literally hundreds of crimes. And as I say, Keir Starmer's Crown Prosecution Service head didn't even spot him. Could this be the next British ambassador appointed by Keir Starmer to be the United States British ambassador?
Yeah, it's very possible. It's very possible. I wouldn't put it past him. No. In all seriousness, I dread to think he's going to be. We've had David Lammy as the foreign minister. Now moved on. We've had Angela Rayner
now promoted to deputy prime minister.
I'm promoted
the second most senior person in Britain. A man who will now give us endless mirth when he stands in for Keir Starmer in PMQs. I would buy a ticket to see.
No, I mean, there's a reason why comedy as an art form is dying, is because people get all their comedy from the House of Commons now. They don't have to go to the Apollo to get good comedy. So no, I dread to think. I really do. I think, in all seriousness, look, it's a sad day for our country when we're in this state of affairs. I really, really hope that we can have a general election as soon as possible, get a reform government in there, because we will make the difference. We are putting together a party of really competent people with business backgrounds, people with real expertise. And the people of this country have had enough. They want to see genuine change. We're doing it at a council level. Tonight, I'm going to a by-election count myself in Mid-Norfolk. There's other by-elections happening all around the country because people have had enough. And the council elections can't come soon enough. And that general election cannot come soon enough. We need to get rid of this dastardly government and get reform in there.
You managed to squeeze in a mini party political broadcast. Nicely done. Slick work. You've been trained by someone very, very good, I bet. Thanks very much indeed. That is a Reform UK candidate as well. You have your say. What do you think about Keir Starmer's performance? Mandelson is gone, but Starmer's still there. Is he the worst Prime Minister in living memory? Who is harmed the most? Peter Mandelson, Keir Starmer, or the country by this particular government? You can follow us on X, on Unprecedented TV, on YouTube. If you like us, then like us in social network terms. And please do share, retweet, repost, and all the rest of it too. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Lembit Öpik. That was Lembit Öpik Live on Unprecedented TV.
Unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented TV.